Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, April 9th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Arizona and a new Supreme Court decision from the state Supreme Court that reinstates a 160-year-old abortion ban from 1964, a decision that outlawed abortion nearly 40 years before the state of Arizona was even a state. This decision here to instate the abortion ban was decided in a 4-2 decision by the Supreme Court justices here, one that would mark the end of abortions as we know it in the state of Arizona, with the exception of one thing. Democrats currently have a Democratic governor in the state of Arizona, which means that Katie Hobbs, as the governor here, she chose it upon herself to do an executive order earlier on this year that would make it so the attorney general is responsible for enforcing laws surrounding abortion. And of course, the state of Arizona had a uniquely close attorney general's race here. We can actually see if we take a look at the elections in the more narrow races. In the statewide ones, the attorney general's race was decided by a margin of just around 400 votes. 1.254 million votes cast for both the Democrat and the Republican, in which the Democrats won by 0.02%. And so now, the Democratic Attorney General in this state, Chris Mays, has announced that she will not be enforcing this draconian law from 160 years ago. A decision from the Arizona Supreme Court here will not be enforced by the Democratic administration, by the Democratic Attorney General, and that no one who does in fact perform an abortion will be prosecuted in the way that the law might suggest. But that's pretty much the protection that Democrats have for the time being while they are in office. The state of Arizona, though, fundamentally should be upholding this law based on the Supreme Court's decision. And so when a Democratic administration is in power, they can make that decision not to. But if a Republican was to win in 2026 and the Attorney General had flipped parties, they very well would be able to switch over and make a decision in the affirmative for this abortion ban and enforce it as they would. And so that is going to be something that I think we are going to find, a lot of people outraged about. While on the immediate end, I think the first thing that I think many Democrats were concerned about was the issue about women in Arizona. Is there going to be a problem here when it comes down to the issue of abortion? The Democratic administration pretty much handled that immediately. They sort of came into this with an elections has consequences take and said that, we have the jurisdiction to not enforce this law, so we are not going to enforce this law. On the other side of it, though, I think Democrats are looking ahead to the future about what this might mean in the event that there is a Republican administration, and in the event there might be a Republican White House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican House. And so with this decision, it comes at a very, very bad time, around the time that voters are already talking about Donald Trump's position on the issue of abortion. Just 2 days ago, he announced that it is entirely up to the states. In fact, I think this might have been yesterday and not 2 days ago. Regardless, though, he says it's up to the states, and he declined to endorse a national limit. Now, he received pushback, not only from, voters on the left, which is entirely expected, but also voters on the right. Lindsey Graham, a senator from South Carolina, was critical of Donald Trump's decision, saying he's making a mistake, and vowed to push with a national restriction bill in the U.S. Senate. CNN also has been tracking the 13 times over the past 25 years that Donald Trump's stance on abortion has shifted, both left and right. 4 years ago, he was much more pro-life than he sounds in the speech that he released on Truth Social. That's a fact. And the reason for that is because Donald Trump is largely trying to center himself. He tried to preempt decisions like this one because he knew that people would be looking to the president and their stance on abortion as to how they may vote this coming November. Of course, there are very, very important topics that matter for this November, but this one is going to be a very hot button, very salient issue in this election cycle, and Republicans have never gotten it correct. And they do it wrong again. This Supreme Court here is entirely Republicans, which means some Republicans did in fact oppose this abortion ban. But it is the fact that this is a law from 1864 here that really calls everything into question. Is this a valid law? The Supreme Court seems to suggest yes, but should it be enforced is going to be the question. And voters now are going to be provided with an opportunity to vote on the issue of abortion this coming November. Forget all of the, decision about the discussion around outrage is only temporary, votes really won't be impacted by abortion. The same rhetoric that was espoused in 2022, might I add, incorrectly, is being very much brought back in this election cycle. I think a lot of people are looking at very important issues like the economy and healthcare and international affairs, and they're looking at that and saying, voters care about that more than they care about abortion, which in some states that very well may be the case. But that isn't to say that they don't care about abortion at all. If that was the case, Democrats would have been demolished in 2022, and we know that was not what happened here. And so now that Arizona is going to have an abortion rights amendment, they say that they've gathered the required signatures, but more often they will gather more just in case some are struck down for a variety of different reasons. They want to be sure that this is getting on the ballot this coming November. They gathered the signatures here for an abortion referendum at the same time at which, that was only 8 days before this article was released, where the, Supreme Court decided that this abortion ban will be reinstated. You are now seeing a lot of criticism and honestly a lot of outrage that will likely lead to Democratic victories this coming November. And I know what you might be thinking. How is it that this directly translates to a Democratic victory in this November? Well, one, I will say that the reason why I've been so bullish on Joe Biden's chances in the state of Arizona have largely been guided by the generic ballot here, the general election head-to-head matchup between Trump and Biden, where Donald Trump leads by 0.6%, especially in states like Arizona, where he leads by 4.5% and is nearing a majority of votes in this state. But I caution and I temper it by saying these polls are very far out. We have yet to have a singular poll done in the month of May and in the month of April, and we also fail to realize that this abortion referendum is not public knowledge here. A lot of the times you see the enthusiasm for these things actually begin once they hit the ballot, once there is organizing behind it, once there is a major presence of an abortion referendum on a ballot. And the same can be said even and found in elections like the one in Michigan in 2022, where you look at the preliminary data from months around this time frame in that battleground state, where Gretchen Whitmer was winning by 1 point, losing by 2 in some, in a very close race with James Craig, who was the former chief of the Detroit Police Department. Very interesting backstory. Ended up getting disqualified for falsifying signatures. That's a whole different thing here. But in Michigan, though, the numbers looked a lot better for Republicans prior to an abortion referendum being confirmed and then slated and then voted on the November ballot. And so with this in Arizona, I think there are going to be significant repercussions on this, not only on the presidential, but also in down ballot races. We can actually work our way up in order of interest and order just generally of, competitive nature, because the House elections are also going to see a benefit here for Democrats with an abortion referendum that now with this Supreme Court decision, I can guarantee you people are going to be signing it like crazy, and also going to be a statewide push for this. And of course, a national one we will likely see from the Biden campaign, the Democratic Party, DNCHQ, whatever it might be. But specific to the Arizona House elections here, they were close in 2022, largely on the issue of abortion here. In districts like Arizona's 1st, which Democrats spent $0 in from major fundraising PACs because it was often seen as a Republican stronghold. Republicans didn't think that this race was going to be competitive, and neither did Democrats, and yet it was decided by less than a point. In Arizona's 6th district, it was decided by 1.5%. Democrats also wrote this district off as non-competitive. Even Arizona's 2nd, which was meant to be a district that would swing so far to the right, there was a Democratic incumbent here, but this district here was drawn so exceptionally red here that a 7.7% victory was far from impressive. It was a decrease in overall Democratic support in the state of Arizona. They used to have this majority here, but the redistricting ultimately did screw them so much that they just decided to pull out entirely from the 2nd, entirely from the 1st, entirely from the 6th here, and by the end of it, they ended up being a lot more competitive than Democrats would have thought. And so now, this time around, should Democrats even improve on their margin across the state, where it was 56-43 and return maybe to where it was back in 2020, these districts very well could flip blue. I could genuinely see Democrats back in the majority in the delegation from the state of Arizona, and that would be a very bad thing for the GOP. But it actually could get a whole lot worse. When you take a look at the Senate race right now between Kari Lake and Ruben Gallego, because it's at a unique point too, where this Senate race serves as one of the few battleground states on the Senate map here, joined by Nevada, Montana, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, and probably no real Republican states, maybe Texas, in an extreme case, Florida, but the rest are going to be very solidly conservative. And right now, Kari Lake is losing to Ruben Gallego in this state. She's actually trying to pivot herself as well. She praised this abortion ban 2 years ago, but today now announced that she opposes this decision. Democrats have already released a tape, though, of Kari Lake praising this exact law, citing it and stating it explicitly that she believes that this law should be implemented in the state of Arizona. So it'll be interesting to see how Democrats weaponize that and use it against her, as they have already been doing since this morning. The opposition research went crazy there, but you can see that in Arizona, it serves as a unique state because it is competitive on the Senate level as well. Democrats are looking at this as an opportunity to replace Kyrsten Sinema, who recently announced she will not be running for Senate, and they're looking at it as an opportunity to usher in a progressive Democrat who will vote with Democrats nearly 100% of the time, and that is Ruben Gallego. Republicans have nominated Kari Lake. If her name sounds familiar, it should, because she actually ran for governor back in 2022, and get this, she lost. And she lost in a race that was otherwise very, very winnable. The reason being, she was an election denier and she was pro-life. The issue of abortion was very prominent in the state of Arizona. That's what Democrats campaigned on. That's what Katie Hobbs campaigned on. And by the end of it, she ended up winning, Katie Hobbs, the Democrat here, by 0.6% against all odds. I mean, quite literally, the fundraising numbers were in favorable for Kari Lake than they were for other Republicans across the country. The polling numbers showed Kari Lake ahead by 4 points on Election Day. Not a single poll, you saw here showed Katie Hobbs with an advantage, except for Marist College, which seemed to get it right on the money here, but was not included in the average. But prior to that one, the next one was Susquehanna University and the Federalist back in mid-October. And so all the polls between then, with the exception of Marist, said Lake would win by 3, 2, sometimes 11 points here, according to Fox 10 and Insider Advantage, which historically isn't too far off from the actual margin here. The point being that the issue of abortion was prominent in 2022, a big reason why Kari Lake lost in 2022, and now she's trying to backpedal and run for Senate yet again. And I think given this, and given what Democrats have in terms of ammunition on her pro-life stances, and also her explicit support for this individual bill that is now being completely protested and attacked and torn down by the legislature and, of course, the Attorney General's office, the governor's office here, Kari Lake probably is going to lose Arizona. And I honestly expected her to lose it anyways. She's not the strongest candidate here, and running a repeat candidate who lost her race in 2022 was never the strong decision in the first place, but it was certainly an interesting one. An interesting one that will likely cost Republicans the Arizona Senate race in 2024. Chances are, after this, I don't see a pathway forward, especially with abortion on the ballot here, because it's going to be a consistent and lingering reminder for voters in this state that if they are pro-choice, they probably should be voting for the pro-choice candidates. And that's going to be a problem as the Republican Party tries to navigate states like this one and states like New York and Maryland and others that have this on the ballot slated to be voted on this coming November, where there's going to be a unique amount of interest on abortion in this election that only benefits the Democratic Party. But let's talk very high level. What does this mean for the 2024 presidential election? Well, I will say this. Donald Trump's stance on abortion, even his moderate one, that it is up to the states and he declines to endorse a national abortion ban, is not a popular take. Even amongst Republicans who call it a slap in the face that Donald Trump says that this should be up to the states, that he's making a mistake on the issue of abortion. Not, only mentioning the disappointed Republicans here, but voters are in the middle who, are independent voters, voted left and right in the past few elections. Not all of them, in fact, most of them don't believe that abortion should be illegal in any regard. Many of them believe that abortion should be allowed up until, 22 weeks, 24 weeks. And while that may be, in a sense, a limit, that may be a self-imposed declaration that, at this point in time, I'm no longer vehemently pro-choice, Donald Trump does not align himself with that, has privately called for a national abortion ban, has members of his party calling for a national abortion ban, and has flip-flopped on this issue over the past 25 years, 13 different times. 13 different times, Donald Trump is taking a different public stance on abortion, and that discredits Trump very heavily, which is why I don't think that this really moved anyone's decision on the 2024 election. I think Republicans here are very much trying to center themselves, get back to that idea of appealing to centrist voters. That's why Kari Lake now opposes an abortion decision that she publicly supported 2 years ago, right? People know that the elections of 2022 were a heavy indicator that the Make America Great Again-isms across this country just weren't going to be winnable strategies in these battleground states. In states like Pennsylvania, for instance, where, arguably it should have gone better for the Republican Party, and it just quite frankly did not. Dr. Oz Oz was ahead by 0.4, he lost by 5. In states like New Hampshire, where Don Bolduc was ahead, losing by 1 point, lost by 9 points. In states like Nevada, where Adam Laxalt was ahead by 3.4, lost by 0.9. In many of these instances, especially in battleground states like Michigan, where you had a governor's race where Gretchen Whitmer was predicted to win by 1 according to the polls, she won by 11. In states like Wisconsin, where Tim Michels was supposed to win by 1 and Tony Evers won by 3. In states like Arizona, as I've been mentioning, and as the unique state here, that Republicans saw significant underperformances across this country because Democrats campaigned on the issue of abortion and did so effectively, successfully, and won their battleground states. Voters cared about abortion in 2022, and they do care again in 2024. That's why I believe in Arizona, in conjunction with this abortion referendum on the ballot, the Democratic Party's likelihood at winning in these battleground districts, in the Senate seat, and on the presidential level have increased tremendously here. Voters very, very often, decide to maintain how they're voting pretty much up across the ballot here. What we saw was that Gretchen Whitmer's performance in the 2022 Michigan governor's race here did, in fact, benefit Democrats down the ballot here. You can, in fact, see that in this state, let's go over to the New York Times results because it'll show us exactly how beneficial this abortion referendum was on the ballot and how it was nearly to a T when we see here. These battleground districts here, Democrats won in the 3rd district, a toss-up district by 13. Democrats almost won the 10th district, which was likely Republican here. Elisa Slotkin in the 7th district. A competitive race there, Democrats win by 5. They win in Dan Kilde's district by 10 points. Across this state, Democrats did well, largely because Gretchen Whitmer did as well. The state Senate flipped. The state House flipped. Democrats won a trifecta for the first time in 40 years. Why does this happen? Gretchen Whitmer, but also because of the issue of abortion here. 57% of the state voted for a constitutional right to reproductive freedom. Gretchen Whitmer won 55% of the state. There were very, very, very few crossover votes between Whitmer and yes on the issue of abortion. And if Democrats can replicate what they did in Michigan, they will win Arizona, and the presidential race will be no different. Now, Arizona has fallen a little bit further out from relevancy as the mainstream state to win. And that's because it's 11 electoral votes that without it, Democrats can still win through Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But given the news of today, the Democratic chances in Arizona, I think, have increased significantly enough. The Democrats likely would win this state given the outrage now, given where we are. Forget the polls. Look at the data. Look at what happens when voters consider abortion as a fundamental issue on their ballot in states like Arizona. Even in Arizona, Democrats win. And so with this, it would give Joe Biden 281 electoral votes on a winning map such as this one, which means Democrats, in some cases, can afford to lose Wisconsin and maybe even Nebraska's 2nd district, which would be a worst-case scenario for the Democratic Party. But right now, I think the map is shaping out to be significantly better for President Biden than it was just a week ago, especially in a state like Arizona, which has a significant number of competitive races up across the ballot. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for our 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.